Namaskar and a very good evening to all of you. In the audience today we have a galaxy of very important people. It's practically the who's who of Guwahati here in front of me. After listening to Professor Nani Gopal Mohanta for the last 28 minutes, it left us spellbound on the role and the contribution of Srimanta Sankardev in the Bhakti movement. I want to bring you to another aspect of Srimanta Sankardev, which has been my area of research when I had the privilege of working for probably the first time on a management aspect of Srimanta Sankardev under the supervision of Professor Munindra Kakoti of Guwahati University, who had at that time been the Vice Chancellor of the Assam Rajiv Gandhi University of Cooperative Management in Shivsagar. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard what Professor Nani Gopal Mohanta said. Before going into the details of the innovation, the social innovation that Srimanta Sankardev had brought about, I'd like to, it may sound a little like a bit or classroomish, but then I'd like to take you to the few definitions of what social innovations mean. The Stanford Graduate School of Business, Sarah Soul and others, they have described social innovation as the process of developing and deploying effective solutions to challenging and often systemic social and environmental issues in support of social progress. Social innovation is not the prerogative or privilege of any organizational form or legal structure. It often requires active collaboration of the constituents and of the people. There's one definition. Professor Burgan of the University College of London, he has described social innovation as activities and services that are motivated by a goal of meeting a social need that are predominantly developed and diffused through organizations whose primary purposes are social. Another definition is social innovation is novel solution to a social problem that is more effective, efficient, sustainable, or just than existing solutions for which the value created accrues primarily to the society as a whole rather than to private individuals. The most significant aspect of social innovation worldwide is that it has to have lasting social value and it has to bring about lasting social change. And it has to be put in practice. It is not to be remain on paper or in books. It has to be practiced, it has to be carried out, it has to be implemented, it has to ensure the participation of the masses. That exactly was what Srimanta Sankardev had done. And if you look at it, you find that social innovation is also something like new solutions, which could be products, which could be services, which could be models, which could be processes, that simultaneously meet a social need and lead to a new or improved capabilities and response and relationships and better use of assets and resources at the disposal of the society. So if you look at the various elements of social innovation, you find that it has to be new, it has to be practical, it has to be applied, it has to be used, it has to have a lasting impact, it has to meet social needs, it has to also improve the capabilities and capacities of the individuals who are part of the community, part of the society. Social scientists have divided social innovations into two categories. One is the disruptive innovations and the other is the sustaining innovations. So disruptive innovations and sustaining innovations are two categories, and it's very amazing to find that Srimanta Sankardev used both categories of disruptive innovations as well as sustaining innovations in order to carry out the social changes which he had identified, which he had marked, and which he had propounded and which he had put to use. If you look at various definitions, we arrive at a series of kind of what would I say, conclusions about what social innovation should mean. It would mean new effective ideas, solutions, activities, and services intended at social progress, new ideas that work, ideas that have to work, new ideas that meet unmet needs of the society, new ideas and solutions to a social problem hitherto unknown or known but have not been applied so far, new ideas that simplify complex solutions, that to simplify, and make them substantially more accessible, affordable, and applicable to a larger population of the people. New ideas and solutions that challenge the social system, that is what Srimanta has done, and the social institutions. New ideas and solutions which bring about greater social and often systemic changes. New ideas and solutions which are more effective. Groundbreaking ideas. New ideas about how people should organize interpersonal activities and interpersonal communication or social interactions to meet one or more common goals of the society. New ideas and solutions which are predominantly developed and diffused through organizations and where individuals take active part in it. New ideas and solutions, the value created through which accrues primarily to society as a whole rather than to the privileged individuals, and so on. So this study was carried out in two ways. One was by studying, looking at the activities and the contributions of Srimanta Sankardev, studying his activities through the solid putis and other descriptive accounts of his life and works, and to see that the social changes and societal changes through the innovations which have brought about can be categorized into as many as 20 categories. These areas of societal changes which Srimanta Sankardev have brought about through social innovations included religion, religious tradition and practices, deities, conduct of religious functions, religious concepts and philosophy, value of worship, very, very important, value of worship, institutions, gurus and saints, religious literary texts and scriptures, festivals, society in general, forms of communication, architecture, music, musical instruments, dance, drama, performance, women and gender, and economic activities of the people. We were trying to find out what in these particular 20 areas, what was the situation before Sankardev had arrived in the scene, and what had happened during his lifetime, and what had happened afterwards till date. I'll just give you a few examples, I won't go into details of it. If you look at religion, for instance, before Sankardev's arrival, Shaktism, Saivism, Tantric Vaishnavism, and Cryptic Buddhism, and a few other minor cults were in prevalence in Assam. But Sankardev brought about a new Vaishnavism or Ek Saran Nam Dharma, which begins to challenge the existing system of worship. Post Sankardev, Neo Vaishnavism or Ek Saran Nam Dharma begins to flourish despite the challenges and continues to flourish and continues to attract more and more people across, not just across the length and breadth of the Brahmaputra Valley, but beyond. If you look at the religious practices and traditions, we find that in the pre-Sankardev period, the primary mode of worship was worship of idols, polytheism was there, worship of multiple gods, blood sacrifice, and so on. Srimanta Sankardev discouraged and opposed the worship of idols and polytheism, introduced monotheism or worship of one and only one God, and he discouraged and opposed animal sacrifice, and he also discouraged certain activities which are in practice or put to practice by the tantrics, by those who practiced Saivism and practiced Shaktism, and also practiced Cryptic Buddhism in the country of Kamarupa. What happened after that, in the post-Sankardev period, we found that more and more people had begun to discard the old tradition of practice and practice of animal sacrifice to join the new faith. In the post-Sankardev period, we find the Namghar, which is without an idol, but which has a garbhagriha or sanctum sanctorum with only a guru asana where the kirtana or the holy scripture is placed. At the higher level we found the Hotra institution, which continues and which not only functions as a religious institution but is also an educational institution. It's a kind of a university, it's a kind of a research center, it's a kind of a center for the art and culture, and it's a center for empowerment of the common masses. When we look at the conduct of religious functions, we find that in the pre-Sankardev period, it is entirely conducted by priests of the so-called upper castes of the Brahmins and others, with the devotee remaining mostly as a mute spectator to whatever is being chanted by the priest. Srimanta Sankardev sought to eliminate the priest or the middleman, introduce the conduct of religious functions by any member of the society or any member of the community, and the monopoly of priests was rejected and broken down. In the post-Sankardev period, we find the establishment of more and more Hotra institutions at the Namgarh as the evidence of more people joining the new faith and shifting to the new Vaishnavism faith, which was propounded by Srimanta Sankardev. If you look at the religious concept and philosophy in the pre-Sankardev period, we find that though Vedanta philosophy and several schools of Vaishnavism were dominant across India, there was not much influence in Assam, except for some minor influence of Vaishnavism in the form of Vishnu worship across the Brahmaputra valley. Sankardev, however, did not work out an independent philosophy as such, because he was more of a man of an action. He based his religious system on the Bhagavata Purana, which fixes God as the ultimate essence of the universe, calls in the Brahmana, the Paramatman, and the Bhagavat, the inner controller or the Antaryamin of the entire universe. If you look at the venue of worship, very, very critical, the venue of worship, you find that in the pre-Sankardev period, it was the temples, the cremation grounds, or under the trees, or in caves that the worship, the religious worship used to take place. Sankardev introduced the Namgarh. At that time it was called the Than. He introduced the Namgarh or the Than, which in the post-Sankardev period took a greater shape, and the Hotra emerged from this entire concept. If you look at the post-Sankardev period, we of course find that there was a division of faith into the four samhatis or the four schools of thought from among his immediate followers, and the establishment of numerous Hotras and Namgarh across the state give an indication that more and more people had shifted to the new faith, the new order that was introduced by Srimanta Sankardev. If you look at the institutions, the changes that he had brought about through his social innovations, we found that in the pre-Sankardev period, the temples were the primary venues of worship or religious discourse, and even for the education, the toll, the Sanskrit toll or the toll for education, which was at the control of an individual, and where mostly it was owned by the institution, by the individuals, and it was sustained on the fee collected from the individual students who joined it. Sankardev instituted the Namgarh and the Than, which later on developed to a concept of Hotra, which became the educational institution, and which became an institution of, particularly Hotra became the residential form of institution, though the toll was a residential form of institution, which Sankardev had himself attended. But what is more important here is that from the toll, where only individual students would enroll, Srimanta Sankardev had taken the education to the Namgarh and the Than and the Hotra, and particularly in the Namgarh and the Hotra, where community participation became the order of the day and mass education came into prevalence across Assam. If you look at the religious institutions, though they are run by priests in the pre-Sankardev era, as also in the post-Sankardev era, they continue to be run so. But the Namgarh is run by the people's body, mostly elected in a very democratic form, through a consensus, where even the last man can preside over religious function, preside over a ceremony, and he can distribute the prasad, and everyone is equal inside it. The monopoly of the priest, the monopoly of the Gohai was broken down. If you look at the festivals, similar kind, you find that most of the festivals in the pre-Sankardev era had centered around the worship of Shakti or Shakta or the Saivite movements and the Saivite gods and rituals. Srimanta Sankardev, as we all know, had brought India to Assam, had taken Assam to India, and in the process it introduced Krishna from the Bhakti movement, which had already begun about 100 years before his emergence. And the Krishna-centric festivals of Rah, of Holi and Janmashtami had evolved and had become mass festivals across the state. Now here comes something very, very interesting, is that if you look at the institutions, the administrative institution, the rulers, you find that Sankardev had refrained from influencing them, refrained from going into confrontation with them. That was also a kind of social innovation which he had indulged in, where he had refused to go into a confrontation despite the fact that his own son-in-law was executed by the king for some kind of a fault, and where one of them had narrowly escaped from being executed. But then he refused to go into a confrontation, refused to waste time there, and when he shifted to the Koch country, to the Koch kingdom, we find that he refused to give a horon to the Koch king, the most powerful, Naranara and Silarai. The intention of that, religious practices should not be an influence upon a ruler, because the ruler has to rule over all kinds of people living within this territory. And he continued to refuse till the last day of his life, and he managed to refuse the repeated pleas of Naranara and Silarai to make them devotees of Srimanta Sankardev. If you look at the area of religious and literary texts, you find a very amazing thing happening in the world which Sankardev had pioneered, and which is closely followed by Martin Luther King in Central Europe. Till the pre-Sankardev period, we find that the scriptures were mostly in Sanskrit, mostly in the so-called divine language. It was unintelligible for the common masses, and the priest had a monopoly of reading them and explaining them to the people. So it was the priest class or the educated class which had monopolized learning, and only a few scholars were there who, however, sought to write in the local language, the Assamese, and one of those schools which Srimanta Sankardev himself attended. But if you look at Sankardev, he was a pioneer in the world of taking out religion from classical languages, from the classical scriptures, into a layman's language, which is Assamese and Brajavali, and he introduced religious scriptures in local vernacular and devised a new section called Brajavali, which gave a big boost to Assamese literature and which brought about a renaissance in Assamese art, Assamese literature, Assamese culture, and so on. In the same way, Srimanta Sankardev had also taken us through his social innovations. He had brought India to Assam and had taken Assam to India through his works in a big way, through his religion, through his faith, through his teachings, through his art, through his culture, through literature, and even the illiterate masses in medieval Assam began to sing the glory of Bharat Varsha, began to sing the glory of India, that is Bharat. If you look at society in general, we find that in the pre-Sankardev era, the society was definitely multi-ethnic, which gets reflected again and again in Srimanta Sankardev's work, which was recited by Professor Mahanta a few minutes ago. And the multi-ethnic society was divided on the caste ethnic lines, mostly because of dominance of the Brahminical rites and the religious rituals that were prevalent at that day, at that time, not only in Assam but across the subcontinent. Srimanta Sankardev introduced inclusivity by loosening the caste system. He did not do away with it, but he loosened the caste barriers, and he began to embrace other ethnic groups from outside the pale of Hinduism. We find that the description that Professor Mahanta had given of the composite Assamese society at that time, from the Jawan to the tribal, everybody became part of it, and everybody was included in the chanting of the verses by enlisting them as disciples. These groups find innumerable mention in the Kirtan Ghosa and in the Bhagavata Purana, which are rendered by the Mahapurush Srimanta Sankardev and Madhav. If you look at the society in general, we find that in the pre-Sankardev period, the village disputes or disputes in the society were mostly resolved by the individual powerful people, the landed gentry or the feudal chiefs. Srimanta Sankardev brought the dispute resolutions and the conflict resolution to the floor of the Namghar and to the floor of the Hotra at times. And most of the disputes were democratically resolved with very little penalty to the person, the individual who has been accused and acquitted, and or accused, even been acquitted after that, and he is let off with a nominal kind of a penalty, but with the assurance that he is being taken back to the fold of the society and he has been given the opportunity to reform himself. There is a very interesting description of this kind of incident which comes from my village in a very important novel called Anya Jug Anya Puru by Devendranath Rasajya, where an individual was accused of a theft, a petty theft, and he was brought to the Namghar, and the Gohai Seth presides over the meeting, and all the important people of the society, of the community, representing different segments of the larger village, they sit down there, and he is being finally proved to be guilty, and the penalty is ek hiki, 25 paisa, and a tamul and a palm. This poor fellow, he didn't live at home. He was a homeless person, and where would he bring this 25 paisa, the hiki, or the palm and the tamul? He'll again have to indulge into theft to get it back. So the Gohai gives it from behind as a take and offer it to the people, and he gets it. So all the opportunities are given there, and that is the kind of social innovation which has been carried forward, which was brought about by Srimanta Sankardev. The most amazing area that Srimanta worked on was communication. He was a master communicator, he was a divine communicator, I would say, where worked on all areas of communication that were available at that period of time, so much so that it included music, it included drama, it included musical instruments, it included painting, it included songs, it included literature, it included poetry, it included drama, it included text, it included acting, it included mime, mimicry, it included costume designing, it included paintings and so on. The launching of Srimanta Sankardev itself is an amazing act of mass communication, that all forms of mass communication available at that period of time when he presented Sinha Jatra, where he himself acted in different roles and he engaged in that community to play the music, to make the backdrops, to design the costumes, to act in different roles, all brought into one. And that exactly probably is the beginning of the word mass communication, where masses get into the act of communication to bring about common good through a common theme of ideas and concepts. If you look at the Vrindavani Vastra, for instance, the Vrindavani Vastra, portions of which are preserved in the British Library and a few other libraries, in the British Museum and a few other museums in Europe, you find, if you look at it from the modern day concept of animation film, you find that the childhood story of Krishna is reproduced there in a kind of animation film. Film was not there at the time, but he used it in the form of a woven piece of huge fabric. In the pre-Sankardev period, if you look at the forms of communication, you find that several major Sanskrit treatises were written in this land of Kamrupa, and among which we know the most important is the Kalika Purana and several other Puranas. But not much is known about drama that had taken place in Assam or in the banks of the Brahmaputra. But then if you look at the pre-Sankardev stone carvings and the old ruins, particularly of the Doha Parvatiya, of Deva Parvat in Numaligarh, or in the Kamakhya temple, or in Madankamdi, we find a lot of dance forms have been depicted in the architectural patterns there. So it can be said that dance form definitely existed because dance and temples are inseparable. Though this doesn't directly connect to Sankardev, it also happens that, as Bharat had mentioned in the comprehensive history of Assam, that the very tradition of Devadasi dance, which had engulfed the whole of India, was presented to India by the temple dancers of Assam. It travelled from Tezpur through Guwahati into Hajo and into Pathsala, and then it reached the mainland India, where it existed till a few a couple of decades ago. That's a kind of dance form that existed in pre-Sankardev Assam. But Srimanta Sankardev, being a born traveler, he had developed the lyrics, singing, poetry, music, drama, mime, dance, fine arts, etc. Not just for art's sake, but as forms of mass communication. If you look at the architecture, as I said, in the pre-Sankardev period, the architectural evidence of temples, shrines found at Baporvatia, Manankamdev, and other places, the mythical reference to Kamakya, Agligor, Bhalupong is a very important center, that the architectural richness of Assam did exist in the pre-Sankardev period or in the ancient period. But Srimanta Sankardev introduced new styles, new designs, especially in the Hotra and in the Namghar and in the other architectural patterns, so much so that there is an amazing description of Srimanta Sankardev's architecture and art forms by Jyoti Prasad Agarwala, where he had looking at the surreal paintings and the architectural patterns of Central Europe, he said that, oh, I was taken aback when I see this and I find that these are all exist in my Namghar, all exist in my Hotra back home on the banks of the Brahmaputra. So that's a very amazing tribute given by Jyoti Prasad Agarwala to the architectural designs and to the patterns that were introduced by Srimanta Sankardev. If you look at music, you find that the innovation that Srimanta Sankardev brought about to replace the temple-centric music that includes an entirely new genre of Borgit, of Bhotima, of Ankar Geet, of Kirtan Gosa recitals, of Ojapali, Kuras, and so on. He had introduced altogether, I think, 34 ragas and melodies, and made music inseparable part of the Ankya, not just of the Ankya Bhavana or Khatriya culture, but of the entire Assamese society. This tradition of music we see has been carried forward by two great personalities during our lifetime or just before that, Jyoti Prasad Agarwala, of course by Vishnu Prasad Radha, and in our times by Bhupen Hazarika. And we find the same tune, the same theme that flows through it, that is the destruction of darkness by bringing forward light. That's the theme of Srimanta Sankardev, that's the theme of Jyoti Prasad, that is also being sung by Bhupen Hazarika. The same theme continues, an amazing innovation that he had done through music to imbibe the people, to inspire the people to fight against the darkness. Darkness could be of anything. Darkness could be of the absence of light. Darkness could be of the absence of literacy. Darkness could be of ignorance. Darkness could be of evil practices. Darkness could be of discrimination, and so on. Jumping forward, I would like to also draw your attention to the innovation or to the intervention he had made on the areas of women empowerment and gender, to do away with gender discrimination. If you look at the pre-Sankardev period, particularly at the during the period when Shaktism and Shaivism had prevailed, women is believed to have been largely suppressed in most communities across Assam. Srimanta gave due respect especially to the quote-unquote low-caste women in society, and the most glaring example is that of Radhika, was elevated to the rank of a saint. But then it is true that he didn't give specific religious role to women, but this is the month of Bhadra, and today is the last, tomorrow is the last day. If you go across anywhere in Assam, you find that in the daytime, in the afternoon, all the Namghars across the state, thousands of them are occupied by lakhs of women who are not only just reciting or singing bhakti songs, or they are indulging in Nam Prasanga, but also sorting out other issues beyond the purview of the Nam Prasanga. That is where women, the Namghar particularly, is where the women of the society meet, the women of the society get empowered, the women of the society get enlightened, just because of the intervention brought about by Srimanta Sankardev. Last but not the least, if you look at the economic aspects, we find that Srimanta Sankardev had, through the Bhakti movement, through his activities, also promoted all kinds of art and craft which would ultimately give livelihood to the people. Weaving, metal craft, rock sculpture, promoting artisans. By cluster weaving is a very, very important thing, and the very Vrindavani cluster is an example of working in large groups on a single piece of work. It's an amazing work. Special fabric weaving, that is called, and other bamboo craft apart from musical instruments. And even today, if you go to most of the hotras in Bhati, you will find that a bhakot, he may not be qualified in any kind of higher art form, but he can produce amazing works on works of sculpture on wood, on bamboo, and on other various other materials. If you look at personal lives of people, the impact that Srimanta Sankardev created, he introduced personal hygiene, correct social behavior, moral lessons, ahimsa. Probably, if you look at it, that ahimsa, which was picked up by Gandhi from Buddha, and if you read Bezbura, you find that Bezbura has placed Srimanta Sankardev at par with Lord Buddha, saying that the ahimsa is one common theme running between the two. And then Srimanta Sankardev had also worked against or inspired people against taking intoxicants. And also we find reference of how he had worked against or motivated people not to cultivate or consume poppy and had declared it improper. What had happened in one of the music, drama and plays and dance form which had created the biggest impact in the society, the other would have had impacted upon the Assamese society, the innovation of the local language for religious purposes. That's very, very important, because replacing the classical Sanskrit language with the local vernacular Assamese as the medium of writing scriptures and translating the great classics and other texts was yet very, very significant. And social innovation of Srimanta Sankardev, that has been reflected time and again, and it had a ripple effect. It had an amazing ripple effect in the sense that while the access to scriptures and virtue of the religious prayers and worship became easier for the common masses, cutting across social barriers, it provided a much needed boost to increasing literacy, social awareness, and participation of the masses in all kinds of community work. These in turn definitely caused a major empowerment on all fronts: religious, social, literary, cultural, and moral. Subsequently, simultaneously, it provided a huge boost to Assamese language and literature, which finally led to a renaissance in Assamese art, literature, and culture. And especially important is the fact that Srimanta Sankardev also brought India to Assam and taken Assam to India. And you'll find that there are at least 60 references to Bharatvarsha in Srimanta Sankardev's work, which you don't find in most of the in the works of most of his contemporaries, where they sing of the glory of India, the glory of Bharatvarsha, the glory of this great country. Thank you so much, Mahanta and Bhaskar Jyoti Mahanta, and thank you, learned audience, for giving me this patient hearing. You take patience.